So, I don't need to introduce you, that's already been done, tick. So my opening question, actually before I get to that, what I'd really like to know is the kind of mix of people that we've got in the audience today. We've done it with a couple of our other talks and it's been quite interesting to see who we're actually talking to. So if we could start with a show of hand, who's a lighting designer? Okay. Really? Okay, architects? Any architects? We've got a couple. Interior designers? A few more. Product designers? Anyone? Manufacturers? Okay. Lighting manufacturers, specifically? Yeah, okay. Alright, so we've got a mix, which is good. That's always nice to see. Sometimes it feels like we're just talking to a glass ceiling. Okay, so my first question, to kick things off, I wanted to ask you all what some of the common misconceptions around light are. And Sally, we're going to start with you.
Well, that's quite an open question because light is all around us and it's really difficult to understand and it's much harder to actually think how to do it well.
Okay. Keith, Nick, any thoughts? Who wants to go next? They didn't like this question when I've told them how to answer.
Is this working? Can everybody hear at the back?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. It is an extremely large question. I think the biggest misconception about light, and Keith actually changed the wording to light specifically and very wisely, is most people start thinking about products. When people talk about light, suddenly is it a down light, an up light, a pretty decorative light, or whatever. And in fact, light is not all about product. It is about this amazing commodity that we can't see until it touches surfaces. So I think that's the biggest misconception about light.
Keith?
Okay, I'll have a go. I think one thing is for me is that light is, people think light should be static. Light is always in motion. I think sometimes we kind of get frozen in this idea that something needs to look a certain way and that's it. But I think that the idea that light, for me, is always, it should be in a kind of point of transition.
If you think about it, that's what natural light is. And if you take our references and inspiration from that, I think you're so true that it is that. And it's also something that creates an emotion.
So what does doing it properly actually involve when it comes to light that people perhaps don't see or realise? Keith?
I'm not sure whether we make it hard work or it is hard work, but it is a lot of hard work. I think that it would seem simple that, you know, once you understand the tools of the trade, there are several moves that we can make. But it's of course the kind of the combination of those moves which are unique to that project, which make it special. So that I think, in a sense, the essence is and the hard work goes into the experience of tailoring light for the project. That's really, I mean, we spend too much time worrying about that, I think.
Nick, anything to add on that?
I think the most important thing at the start of a project is not to worry about the light at all. The most important thing is to understand the project, understand the materials, understand who is going to use that building, understand who we want to attract to use that building, understand who's going to see that public realm. And I think we put a lot of research into the background of the project and the context of the project, the relationships with adjacent buildings, or if it's a restaurant, you know, competitive restaurants in a region, or if it's a museum and gallery, how does it sit within the public realm? So I think that's really important to concentrate on understanding the project before we start thinking about how we're going to light it.
And I think really from that, there isn't one solution. There are many solutions. And that's what the research actually brings, is you have to work out which is the right solution to fill the brief, fill the emotion for that space.
And that's probably some of the issues sometimes, isn't it? Is that people who aren't working in light don't, because there isn't just one thing that fixes all, it's then hard to sort of navigate or understand which way to go with it, and that could then lead back to these misconceptions. Would you agree? Or disagree?
I think because you'd think it was simple, but I actually feel that because we see the world differently. That's the other thing which I think is if you spend a career working with light, I think you start to see the universe differently. You see every space differently. You see all surfaces differently. And sometimes I think to be a good collaborator, which we are all have to be good collaborators, you have to reset your mind a little bit and understand that people are seeing light in a very different way to us. Hence the need for constant communication and education about what light is.
Yeah, the previous talk was all about residential lighting, and one of the words that kept coming up was education, and how people don't really see it or don't understand the importance, or because if it's good lighting, you don't even realise it's really there. Nick, you look like you've got something on the tip of your tongue.
I think, as Sally said, that there are many ways that can be right, and actually, you can have a residence is a good thing to think about. I'm sure all of us have worked on residential projects where you've got a family, and the family have completely different needs and designs within that project. So you might have one person that wants very dark, moody, low-key, understated lighting, and you may have somebody else that really wants it bright and cool and cheerful. So you've got to navigate and balance. This is where understanding who's going to use a property is the best way of being able to do great lighting design. When you're doing speculative offices, we're then looking at a general picture rather than a specific end user, which is always better. So I think that we shouldn't think of it as one correct solution. We often see some really bad solutions, but there is more than one correct solution most of the time.
Keith, you were shaking your head, maybe smiling.
I mean, obviously this is a closed audience, but I find residential projects really hard for lighting.
Okay.
Really hard. Although I believe myself to be quite tolerant and empathetic in all of those ways, when it really comes down to it, it's very hard because you end up talking about the psychology of a person or a relationship. It goes way beyond putting a few lights in spaces. That sometimes is what makes it hard. The hidden complexities and emotional responses that people have. Where did that come from? So residential is particularly tricky.
Okay.
I've done a lot of residential, and yes, I can vouch that it is quite tricky. It is the briefs. Probably that's why scene setting control helps. You can have the bright scene and the mood scene, but it's actually getting the brief early on, and that's true for any project. What is the end outcome? And what I hope a lighting designers can deliver more than that, because you obviously want to have invisible light, you want to actually have a mood that feels good for the space, but you can actually make that space feel very different, and there's no other medium other than light that actually can transform the space to be something totally different.
Okay, so with that in mind then, and we were talking about sometimes not thinking about light straight away, thinking about how the space is being used and stuff. I wanted to explore a bit more with the audience some of your design processes, if you're happy to share that information. Sort of like where you start, and because there is just not one solution, how do you then begin to navigate that when it comes to a project, whether it's commercial or residential?
Me?
Yeah, go on then.
So I think there are some common parts to the process, but I also think we have to talk to our clients and the architects and the interior designers and establish a process that is comfortable for them as well. And that's part of our role, is getting the brief and understanding the brief properly. And then there has to be a degree of fluidity about how that unfolds, to work with a team of people that we are. There's a comment about collaborating earlier. Everything is about collaboration with lighting design. Everything's about collaboration. Setting the process that we want to undertake should be something that we do as a collaborative process at the start. There's a massive challenge in the current commercial market, and that is project managers and clients are driving design programs to ridiculous points where the process is being severely damaged, in my opinion.
And how are you navigating that as a studio?
By trying to discuss the fact that there's a certain process. It's not about having 10 people working on a project. It's working with the architect, working with the interior designer, and having time with the client and end user. And we just try to show that how important that is, and we try to express very early on about the process of understanding the building and evolving ideas. We used to have so much more time to unravel ideas, and particularly large-scale commercial projects and big master planning projects now, they're not giving us adequate time to examine enough options and come out with the very best solutions, in my opinion. So we do our very best around these programs that are on a large amount of the project. I'm sure it's the same for you guys.
I think he's totally right that there's a feeling of not being appointed early enough, not being able to give one's input. I mean, as a lighting designer, you've seen masses of different things over the years. You can add to the development of the project in a very constructive way, but if you arrive too late, your hands are tied before you can start.
So then it almost feels a bit pointless in some ways.
You can still deliver something, but some of what you could have done may no longer be possible. But if you've been involved slightly earlier, it would have been able to actually have added to the project. And I think it's interesting, you've got lots of egos on the project, and there are lots of people, whether it's interior designer, client, architect. I think the lighting designer has to have the least ego in order to navigate between these other egos and to create the collaboration.
Keith?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it takes a long time, if you've got a design ego, to recognise in lighting design how to use it and when to use it and when to just show great humility, because no great collaboration comes from having too much ego. And we spend a lot of time battling with people's egos, but our job is to really just sit back and recognise when is the right time to kind of lean into an idea, and when to be passionate and committed to something. I think that the one thing I would say about process is the process is very different to how it was 10 years ago to 20 to 25 years ago. It is not, and unfortunately it's not the case where the tried and tested process that used to lead to good results we're allowed to follow anymore. Partially it's about time, partially it's about technology, other people's access to knowledge about lighting. So in a way we've had to recognise reluctantly, because we used to follow very strictly a kind of REBA architectural process, so we would run alongside the architecture. Architectural processes have changed so dramatically now, and the way that drawings are released, the way that models are updated, the need for visualizations right through to the day of opening. It seems ridiculous, but that is the case. So we've just recognised sometimes, what can we get paid to do work on this project? And then you backfill the process sometimes as best you can.
And what's caused that change? Is it just a generational thing? That's just how it's just an evolution of design, or is there sort of driving factors behind those changes? Do you think?
Do you mind if I carry on?
We've opened a can of worms.
I think that it's worth recognising as lighting designers where we sat 25 years ago, and we kind of disrupted a market effectively. A market that was, in a sense, you could get design or design guidance from manufacturers, engineers, architects, of course, and we really made a space for ourselves. And then as we've gone through the last 20, 25 years, we've educated the market broadly, very, because that's what we are experts in this, just through doing our 10,000 hours, we are experts at this. And by educating the market, the space in which we inhabit, I feel, is getting tighter and tighter. And therefore, decisions are made without us. Times get tighter. The need for a lighting designer is still a question, which seems ridiculous, doesn't it? We've all kind of paying mortgages and running a career, but you can't believe that your job is still a question mark. So I think that it's partially to do with we've generously educated the market, and it's kind of closed the space for us a bit tighter.
Microphone.
Well, I understand that, but I also think there's more lighting designers, and there's a lot of good lighting designers as well now, doing more work than ever before. And I think that transition goes back to where Jonathan and people like that really kicked off in the 1980s. I think it goes back 40 years where that transition started, back to that point. You know, I think the real problem is project managers and financial engineers. And they have decided that we can design and build buildings in ridiculous speed, and I think that that's where it comes from. Clients want to hear that they can take a site from nothing to a building in 3 or 4 years, and the thing that gets squeezed often is the design process. So all that stuff we used to do with foam board mock-ups that we now do with 3D printers, you know, all those things are so little time to actually do those wonderful little experiments to refine the integration details and things like that. So I think that's where the problem of time comes from, and technology makes it look so simple. You know, it all looks very simple, doesn't it? But you know, unfortunately, I feel BIM is wonderful in principle and a disaster in practice, because the model continually moves every single hour, not just every day. It never gets fixed, and it is a really massive problem, I think, not just for lighting designers, for the whole team involved with building, with designing and building new buildings. Now, somebody keeps saying to me, you never see a builder on site with a 3D model under their arm.
Sally, anything to add?
I think most of it's been said, but actually it's I think time is the fact that one's squeezed with time. I think also it's the technology. A lot of people feel like giving a few ideas. They're suddenly a lighting designer, they can visualize something, they have no idea if that's really going to work. You know, I'm often shown by clients, oh, we'd like this effect. And you're looking at the structure thinking, there's no way that will work. And I think it's almost, it's a bit like interior designers have said, you know, clients coming with endless Pinterest, you know, or what, they've almost designed it in advance without realising the complexity.
Yeah. That what they can see isn't actually possible. Yeah. And it's almost this, we talk a lot about, it's going off on a bit of a tangent, well, not really, but there's a lot of talk about designing for well-being and designing for wellness, and, you know, the effect that a space can have on people, and taking that into consideration more. Surely then that's contradictory in a way to these short time frames. It's, you know, you've not got as much time to make these beautiful spaces and make these spaces that are going to be enjoyable. Is that something that you are experiencing, or you find, or is it still possible to design with well-being in mind?
It is, but that's a level of kind of trusted faith that a team has to have in, a good lighting designer. You know, having been through projects before, you know what the real outcomes might be and what's involved. So you get, you know, in a sense, you get to use that weight of experience, as it were, to kind of make the work better. But, you know, there's a lot of things that are expected of projects all at the same time, and they often are contradictory. And that's sometimes, there's a little bit of kind revelation of that through the project, where you say, well, you asked for this and you wanted that, but actually this is where we are, this is the kind of the power density that we can use, that visual can't do those things. I hate doing it, but it is a necessary part of unpicking the project. And rather than saying, it doesn't fucking work, you have to start again, that doesn't work. But you have to kind of kindly move a project into reality. Certainly with people arriving with already expectations that it's going to be, you know, low cost, low energy, and great for people.
I think the accreditations that we're all given at the start of a project are sometimes completely impossible to achieve because they oppose each other. So people want LEED Platinum and Estate Armour, then they want WELL accreditation. But WELL, it actually requires more light than the other accreditations allow to get accredited to the levels they want. So there's a complete misunderstanding, I think, with briefing. Then you've got, you know, light pollution, dark skies and everything else, which is important. And then the client will show you a visual of lasers and sky trackers. Like, this is what we want. And then there's a criteria of dark skies and no light upwards. And it's like, there is a lot of nonsense. And that's where the briefing, that's where the education and briefing to say, hold on a second, you cannot achieve well and this and that. And by the way, if you want this really
just hold your mic up.
Oh, I was told before.
Told him off so many times. I knew he would do this.
I think it's an important area, which again is at the start of the project, to set the correct brief and try to help educate the team that the accreditations that are practical to achieve. Of course, we want to create fabulous space, public space outside, space inside someone's home that is a joy to be at. And that comes back to all individuals. So what's a joy for one person is not for another. So it has to be flexible.
Sally, anything to add to that?
I think most has been said, but I think it is that thing is that lighting is about well-being in every sort of context. There's obviously the sources that are well-being and make you feel good and react, but there's also everything about light is well-being. You're so right about you can't make a space. You can't start lighting that exterior in a dark sky environment. And you're exactly right. I had it yesterday. They showed me all these uplit trees, this floodlit building, and then they said, and it's only got to be dark skies. I said, well, none of that's possible.
And you'd like me to do that how? Okay, so I feel like we're sort of touching on this a little bit through the conversation naturally, but I guess, what does it take to be a lighting designer then? I mean, you guys have been doing it a long time, and there'll be people in this audience with varying levels of experience and people that aren't lighting designers. So I'm guessing resilience is one of the, you need to be resilient as a lighting designer. But what would you say it actually takes? And
resilience, a lot more charm than I expected. I think you're in constant negotiation. Where you're, there's a lot of convincing people and reconvincing people and making people feel comfortable and recognizing people's anxieties, which often doesn't come at you directly; it comes at you indirectly. I suppose the one thing for all the process issues one has to deal with, it's also very important to be a good designer, because when you boil it all away, you boil all the processes and the personalities and all those things away, do you have any good ideas? Because if that's sometimes I feel a real revelation, even within our practice, where we go through a lot of processes and right, anyway, what are we doing? And I think that's a very important thing. It's hard because it gets lost in all this noise. Being a good designer is important.
What I think is important is all of what you've said, but it's also the fact that lighting is an emotion. It makes you feel something inside. If you look at it in a book, you look at different lit effects, and you visually see it, but you don't feel it. When you're in a space, you feel something. And that's very hard to present, because you're presenting it before you're feeling it. And I think that being able, as a good designer, to understand that lighting works in 3 dimensions. I mean, nowadays we have so much 3D modelling and things, but in the old days I had a plan and an elevation. I immediately knew what that 3D space would be. I'd immediately recognised where the arches were, where it was, or where the gaps were that I had to know about. So I think you've immediately got to be thinking in 3D, and you've got to be understanding emotion.
Well, obviously everything Keith and Sally have said I completely agree with. I think there isn't one right answer. I think you can have a lot of different skills to be a great lighting designer. I think, like Keith said, you fundamentally have to be a good designer to start with, and you have to have an understanding of space and light. I think communication, which is what Keith touched on, being a great communicator is really important. And to be a really great lighting designer, you need to be a great communicator. And you need to instill confidence in your client, in the architect, in the interior designer. It's interesting, my observations over a long time are like Keith's practice. I see them working with the same architects year after year, and I suspect that they've got a fabulous relationship of trust. The same with Sally, and the same happens in our practice. And I think we've ended up with groups of people that trust us and come to us because of that long-standing collaboration that's built up over a long time. So there's a lot of skills. Technical skills should not be underestimated either, particularly in this complex world of LEDs with all the challenges they have and the control challenges that they have. So having high levels of technical skills is definitely really important. So you can have a fantastic lighting designer that can be more technically biased, and you can have one that's more creatively biased. They need to then work in teams together. It's quite difficult being one direction or the other and being a one-man band and trying to do everything on your own. There's very few people have all those skills to a high level. So, yeah.
Why do you think there's so much fear around lighting? It kind of feels like you're having to convince people. You have to almost be a salesperson for lighting and you're almost.
I don't see that.
You don't?
I suspect that Keith and Sally don't see it because people that are coming to us
Trust you.
well, a lot of them are old friends, clients. Clients and architects and interior designers, but also the fact they're coming to us probably means they're pretty understanding that light is really important, and they're willing to pay, professionals that are not inexpensive to look after their building, because they understand that we can add value to their buildings, which is really important. If it's not a residence, we need to add value. The lighting needs to add value to a building, it needs to make it a more wonderful place, it needs to make it more sellable, it needs to add to the actual value of the space. And I think clients we all work with a lot recognise that. So I think we probably don't see so much of the fear, because the people that come to us are not frightened because they're coming to lighting designers.
They've seen the light. Did you like that one? I'm quite proud of that. I had a question then, it's gone out of my head because I was making a joke. Sorry. Do you think, just going back to your point, Sally, about how the design process has changed and things, do you think designers coming into lighting now are at a bit of a disadvantage compared to, because processes have changed? Or, because you've obviously got all those years of experience of how you used to design under your belt and now you can apply that. Do you think, or do you not, do you think it's okay? Or
I think the technology's changed. It was much easier when I started. It was halogen and tungsten, and you could immediately get a good effect. You could dim things easily. I think there was a midway stage where it was really tricky, when LED hadn't achieved what it has now, that I could do without, but I could sort of slowly think that I wish that phase hadn't been there. And I think that all the technology has made it more complex, but all three of us were brought up through that. So I suppose you have more expertise purely because you've lived through different generations.
yeah.
I think there's a really big issue. I think that the hard yards that I know Keith, Sally and myself went through are things that people try and skip round in this fast-track world. When I actually went in the 1980s, 40 years ago, out with Sally looking at projects in the evening. And we did that in our own time, at our own cost. And I'm sure Keith did the same, I know Jonathan did the same. And I don't see those really hard yards. We'd spend night after night going to see the latest opening of a museum, gallery, public area or whatever, in our own time, with our own money. And those hard yards could still be applied today for people to use their eyes, not computers. Go out there and look and observe and learn from what you see. You can walk anywhere and learn about light, good or bad. And I don't see as much of that going on now. I think people want this fast track solution on a computer. They want to go home at 5:30 at night. It's not that occupation. Anybody that wants to go home at 5:30 in the evening is in the wrong job. This is a total commitment job. 7 days a week, every hour you're awake thinking about it.
Commissioning in the summer starts at 10 o'clock. And I know that I've often been there, and the sun was rising.
It does take a lot of time to be good at this. I think, as much as some aspects of our work can be hurried along, you can't get the expertise and the knowledge without being there. And I think that in a world where everything, even all the light we use is digital technology now, but light is inherently, emotions are inherently emotions. They are analog emotions. That materials, light on materials, or however it's done, is ultimately what people react to. And I think that the one thing that I would encourage anyone coming into it nowadays is to stop fucking computers for a sec, because that will happen anyway, because that's, you know, everywhere. But the ability to understand how light behaves on surfaces, it sounds so simple, but it amazes me sometimes how little engagement people have between a light source and some stuff, because it's never the same twice for some reason. That's why it's so hard sometimes. You think, I know how to do this. Oh, it's not the same this time. Wonder why. And you don't know that unless you do your mock-ups and you go to site, and site mock-ups are really hard work, and you're there all night and all that sort of stuff. But my God, you learn a lot. And also taking risks, going to site, doing something just to check it and saying, oh shit, won't do that again. That's part of it as well. You can't do that on a computer. You just do Control Z and it will away. You can't do that with real life. So I think going in a funny way, every part of our process now is becoming more and more digitised. But for me, I'm kind of driving everyone back to the real world. Because if you don't do that, the whole thing's kind of, unless we all live in a virtual world, and thank God we don't.
I totally agree with you, because to me testing is all. When somebody asks me, oh, what's that detail? I said, well, test it first, then draw it, because if you test it, the location of a simple thing like an LED strip from a wall, the difference between close up to it to 10 mil away, 20, is an entirely different effect. And it's actually by that testing that you make people understand what light does. And it's also how you can then, not argue, or when you're talking to an architect and they say, you can't have it that near the wall, it just won't work. You can be really, you'll know in yourself that you're saying the right thing because you've tested it.
I think that's where technology is helping us. You know, 3D printing, it's so economic, it's so simple. So you can print out a detail, take it to the architect and say, by the way, if that LED linear strip is 3 centimetres from that surface, it's too close, we need it to be 5, and you can just show them. That's the advantage of technology, things like that.
I also think it would be great if people spent more time talking to end users and maintenance people, as dry as that might sound. I do think, you know, when you think about what it takes to get into that detail and put that light in and maintain it, it has a massive impact. If we're doing permanent lighting schemes, you've got to think at least about 2 or 3 maintenance cycles. And unless you build it and think about how you're going to maintain it, I often stand on chairs and pretend I'm in a basket and think, well, can I actually get that down? And would that work? Can I get my big fat hand in there and do that? Or not? Yeah, you have to do that. Otherwise, your work will die when it hits the maintenance.
Do you think that does get forgotten about a lot of the time?
Tiny details that you know, tiny details, slimmer and slimmer, and what have you. You need to, you know, you basically only maintain it if you've got 2 fingers. You know, it's impossible.
I've remembered my other question. Just going back to the sales side of lighting. We had a talk yesterday that was talking about whether lighting is still undervalued, and there was somebody in the audience that asked the question of how do you convince obviously you guys are all trusted at this point, so you're not seeing that lack of trust anymore or so much, but she wanted to know from our panel, how can you convince a client that it is needed if they are thinking about making cuts and it's like, well, we can cut on the lighting or we can cut this, but we don't need it, we don't need that. What advice would you give for sort of fighting that corner and selling it, I guess? Anyone want to kick us off, or should I pick?
I think the first thing you have to do is make sure the design actually represents value. Because sometimes we do put in 1 or 2 layers that perhaps, you know, we could take out without huge detriment. So we have to examine internally that we're comfortable that every lighting element that we've designed into the project adds value and we can justify it. Then it's about the cost of the equipment, and I think this is where showing clients that they need to use good quality, not necessarily Rolls-Royce quality equipment, but good quality equipment is important, and that comes back to showing them working live samples, not visualizations, showing them the difference between a cheap €20 downlight as opposed to a €70 professional instrument. So I think communication again, but budgets are under pressure, and it's not just every single aspect of just about every project we do is under pressure. That's from structure all the way through to every component. And it's right that we are examined for value, and that's where, as long as we can defend the design because we've spent time considering carefully, it's back to this time factor that is problematic, then I think that's what we have to do. Then when you get down to choosing light fixtures, a horrible process of the contractor turning up with alternatives, it's really easy. It doesn't worry me, that process, because what we do is we take along a working sample of the product we specified, and you let the contractor get their €10 product out of their case and turn it on. You don't even have to say anything most of the time because the project manager and client can see the difference straight away. So I think it's trust, communication, working with the team as every part of the process is.
I think it's the trust, as you say, it's the trust. But you're right that you sometimes design more in a project initially because you get excited. One of the worst things is, I think, not being allowed to be part of that value engineering. If they're doing it, then they do it without you. They'll take out the wrong things. You've got to be part of that process. And sometimes they think we'll be protecting it too much, but we're also going to be the ones who know which bits to leave in and which not. You know, there might be things like, I often will leave a supply or an additional lamp socket or additional this, only the socket, because I know that corner is going to be dark. They're going to need something, and I can't convince them. I know that I've got something to do later. And I think that's the key, is being involved in that process. And if you aren't involved in the process, they'll just swap things out, as you've said, without realising you could have taken another element out that would have saved more.
Anything to add, Keith?
What was the question?
So yesterday we had somebody who was asking about how you convince a client or a design team that, you know, the lighting is necessary. Like, if they're really against it or wanting to value engineer it out or anything like that, how do you sell the need for the light?
The way you communicate, I suppose, through ideally physical proof of concept is the most impactful way to get it. If it's an existing project, doing it before and after is great, because it's that's when you have the biggest dramatic impact on a space. We often layer things up element by element, which sometimes confuses clients because they don't know which one we want. We want all of them, but we're layering it up. And then you start to show what every element is doing. The other thing that we do spend a lot of time as well is remember to show the daytime view and the nighttime view. That may not sound like genius, but sometimes it's very important to remind everybody what we did, what was the element that was added on. And I think once you get into those kind of that conversation about the layering, and if clients engaging that, we've done a few clever tools where you allow almost live in the presentation the client to decide what level they think the window should be. It sounds really dangerous, and we always have a reset button which takes us to the one we want. But if you allow somebody to engage in that process, even in the visuals, you get so much more.
Having that ownership over it.
Yeah, rather than, I don't like the third image, I like the fourth image. It shouldn't be like that. If it's a live, moving, controllable source, being able to show it now digitally, even, or even in a market where you think is the right level, that's really where you can sell it. But it is constant sales. They don't teach you that at architecture and design school. It's a sales job. You know, it's constantly trying to tell people that have more faith, stick with us, let us get to that point, let me convince you again why that's the right thing to do. And if you miss out any of that, the job falls to pieces.
Sounds exhausting. So that leads me nicely on to my next question about collaboration. So we've had other talks this week again that have discussed collaboration and the importance of light. And so for you, given your many years of experience, what makes collaboration with a lighting designer successful? I'm guessing it's going to come down to the things we've already sort of touched on, communication and an openness to work with you, I guess.
I think trust, it's as simple as that. I think trust between all parties and respect of one another is the key thing. And I think it is as simple as that. If all client, architect, interior designer, landscape architect, and the engineering team, and the consultant engineers, structural engineers, strangely enough, people don't realise that we can need to influence structure if we've got buried lights or troughs in floors and things like that. So it's this collaboration, trust and respect of each other.
I suppose it's the word teamwork. That's what you're really saying. It's working together to find the right solution, and Nick said it all really.
I just add one other thing, which may sound silly, but be fun to work with. I mean, I don't know, sometimes we look a bit serious and kind of take it all very seriously, because it is hard work. But remembering that actually a lot of it is human engagement and being kind of joyful to work with, looking forward to being, oh, well, I don't mind being in that meeting. You know, I see it where we are right about something, but if we don't behave properly, we're never going to win. So always remember, that's one thing that Jonathan taught me, is that you always, no matter what you think, his dad used to run a hotel, and that's all about hospitality, front of house, no matter what anybody says, you take it. And John had that. But no matter what anyone said, he was like, right, okay, we'll do it, right? And having that ability to be a positive person to work with is huge, I think, in what we do. Because if people don't like us, they don't let us do our work properly.
I love the thing about having fun. I've always loved my work, and I think it's because I have fun doing it. And I think that's really true of anyone doing any job. You've got to find the fun, because that makes you want to do it and get up in the morning.
I think this is where sitting on Teams meetings is so detrimental. And if you don't have fun on a Teams meeting, and also if you don't bond with the rest of the team, you don't have a coffee, you don't go out for dinner with them afterwards because you're sitting in a cell somewhere, as a kid, on a computer screen. And I think that we need to reduce the amount of Teams meetings, and we need to increase and go, not all the way back to where we were before COVID, but we need to go some way back to more face-to-face meetings across a table with a drawing and a pencil on the table.
Particularly at the beginning of the project, when you're really getting those relationships, I think being face-to-face does it all. I go beyond to go and try and be there face-to-face. I don't think that briefing on Teams works to the same.
We make it work when we have to, but it's not desirable. And it's the same thing, and this is an area where I'm quite controversial. I do not believe you can design properly working from home. I think what we do is a collaborative exercise in our studio, and you need to be sitting next to each other, talking, all the subliminal stuff that people learn of the conversation next door. I know a lot of people disagree with that, but I passionately believe that design is best done in a group, in a studio, with everybody face to face.
100%.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think anything sort of creative or design led, it's, you know, obviously doing the work that we do at Dark Media, we do work hybrid, but I think the times that we spend in the office, it's even just sort of things like Matt will be like, Helen, what do you think of this? Or position of an image, or just anything like tiny little things that you don't get that same thing at home. So yeah, I would say I agree on that.
This idea that light is inherently a thing that you need to know about and play within reality. You can't do that on screen. You know, we did site visits during COVID, and you know, you get there and eventually, oh God, look what happened. You know, I think you have to have people together. Serendipity plays a large part in lighting. It's a very, very delicate, precious game. It can go wrong in a moment. So unless you have people together, I think it can go wrong really quickly. And presuming that you all have agreement because you all hung up at the same time on a Zoom call.
Would anyone in the audience disagree with that? Well, if they do, they're not saying, are they? It's a conversation for another time. I have one more question, but before I do, I'd like to open it up to the audience in case anybody has any questions for you guys. And I'm hoping we're not going to get a room of shy people. There's someone? Great.
Hi. Steve from Rainbow. It's sort of things that Nick was talking about in terms of you know, the things about doing things on computer screens. I'm just wondering how AI has affected your industry, you know, what some of the positives and negatives.
obviously, it's still embryonic and we're all learning. I think people instantly jump to AI as a visualization tool, but actually, there's so much more it can do, you know, whether it's in the accounts team or whether it's on spreadsheets and other things like that. So we have two people from each of our studios formed an AI group that we're trying to uncover how it can help us. And we have not adopted that much AI visualization yet. We tend to work on the visuals produced by interior designers, architects and landscape architects, and we manipulate them a little bit by AI if we're removing objects, but we're still doing that with Photoshop and other tools as well. And then whether it's a more photometrically accurate tool as well. So we haven't started really engaging with AI other than we've invested in a group within our practice just to really try and understand how it can help us.
I'd say very much the same. We're actually, and the funny thing with visuals is you say to like the front of some cupboards, suddenly you find that the cupboards have got glass on them. I mean, you have to be careful because you could present something totally wrong. So it's really in its infancy, but maybe we're not using it enough. I think it can give ideas, but it's again, you still got to test it, and it's only using other things it's seen. It hasn't tested itself for the position of things.
It's a new member of our team, in all honesty. It can do a lot more than I think we anticipated it could, even 6 months ago. Because we did the same thing, we started a kind of AI group, got talking and tried what was this, or maybe that. And a lot of stupid shit happens, and we think, oh, let's not use that. But there's a level of, what we do is effectively hourly rates times time. I mean, that's the fact of applied design. And what we've noticed is that there's a lot of work that happens in the practice that shouldn't be done by a skilled lighting designer.
It's very repetitive.
Yeah. Checking, redrawing, oh God, we have to redo that again. There's a lot of donkey work. I shouldn't say that, but it's true, that you're doing a lot of work again and again and again. And it doesn't, we by no means have the solutions yet, but we've found a number of ways that automation across the process, not all the way across the process, definitely in visuals, because the stuff we found in visuals, and we're kind of, we watch what architects do, how did you do that, and how come you got some of the images so quickly, what tool do you use? So we've learned a lot quite recently about how it can be useful. It still needs to be in the hands of an expert, because it's like being given a Ferrari for your first car, otherwise you just smash it straight into the wall, wasting your time. Yeah? So you need to know, but if you can join a skilled lighting designer with the right AI tool, it's incredible, some of the stuff you can get out of it. But in the process of writing schedules and checking drawings and all that stuff, there isn't, the level of automation now is, it's not really AI, it's just kind of clever automation, a lot of it, but it's pretty scary stuff. It does mean though, and I'd say this, I shouldn't pull these two things together, but if you talk about young designers, energy for work, vocation, lifestyle, all of those things, anyone that can embrace and use, not be scared of it, but can embrace and use these tools properly, will adapt their career. Because our profession's constantly evolving, that's the one thing. If we'd had this conversation 5 years ago, it would have been very different.
I think if we have it in a year's time, it will be very different.
So I think it goes back to this idea, if you're a good designer who's committed to it and willing to be open to the tools, even when you're in your whatever age, I think you will stay engaged in the profession.
Hi, Josh Singh from Magazine. It's been alluded to through most of this talk about the generational change that's going on within the industry. What I was kind of curious about is, other than the AI side of things, which is obviously, Sally, you said it would be different next year, what's going on, where are the biggest changes you see in the next 20 years? Because we've got this generational change, all of these relationships, all of these people that have been coming to you all for a long time in your careers, everybody's kind of at that point, it seems, in the industry. It scares me a little bit. In my business, I've got lots of people retiring as well, and I've had that. So where do you see the next 5, 10, 20 years? What are the biggest changes based on this generational change?
I think it's quite a tricky question. I think.
20
Ask me
years,
next year.
20 years is a long time, Josh, isn't it?
Yes.
No, 20 years is a long time. AI is clearly going to have a massive impact on what we do, but it's like Keith said, it's a tool that needs to be embraced and not something to be frightened of.
And managed so that, yeah.
You know this because we've talked. I'm concerned about high quality European lighting manufacturers. I'm concerned that China are producing very high quality products. The guys from Europe have gone out and shown them how to do it. I'm genuinely concerned for the traditional high quality European lighting manufacturers being able to keep manufacturing in Europe as they want to. That's a big change. You know that because we've talked about it.
Rightly or wrongly, we've always kind of watched what happened in the US. Has been a little bit ahead of us. As a profession, it was certainly ahead of us. And then there was a kind of flipping point where kind of, I'd say UK, certainly UK, if not European, but UK lighting design really kind of started to kind of have a lot more impact than US lighting design. If you go to America now and talk to the people that were once at the top of the game, as it were, they're exhausted about fees. I mean, it's an American thing, of course, in terms of design, but it's always about fees and time and efficiency and all that. And there's very little conversation about the true love and passion of light. I found it quite demoralising the last time, a few times I've been to the US and talked to light designers and thought, you've all fallen out of love with this for some reason. You're so battered down by the business that you forgot why we all went for it. You would like to imagine that in a very kind of puritanical way, that talent will come through and talent will give us all new inspirations. And we try to create, as best we can, a kind of nurturing environment for that. But at the same time, it's a live project, what we do. We are trying to run a business, trying to kind of find work, trying to pay wages, etc., etc. So you can't revolutionise your work. You just have to see what kind of comes through. I'm a little disappointed. I'd say this is a challenge to young lighting designers. I'm a little disappointed at how there isn't more young designers coming through. There's more designers than ever, but I don't see the quality of the work over there. I just see it spreading out. And I would love to see some work where you look at it and you go, wow, that's something I didn't expect. And that I find as a profession a little bit disappointing, actually. I want to see that energy and determination come through. I'm not sure people are into lighting design like they were before. When I first got into it, and people come into it from all sorts of different ways, they fall off a wagon of some shape or form. We're doing something and they went into something else. I'm not sure it's as attractive. I'm not sure we sell the right message. I don't want to do that. I'm unsure about why there isn't more brilliance in a younger generation. And that maybe sound harsh. I don't mean it to sound too harsh, but I would love to see a generation of people in their kind of mid-20s going for it, within practice, and really agitating.
What does that look like?
The way of thinking, that we have a kind of mindset which has worked, of course, and we have our own different ones as a practice. We're looking at different practices, but it's obviously worked to some extent. But I don't know of lots of new young practice that are coming through. I mean, a new young practice is scary, in all honesty, because their fees are lower and they're interesting. However, so I'm at the same time not encouraging it. But I think if I was just being, looking at it as from a professional point of view, I'm not sure who's going to be sitting here in 20 years' time and having this conversation.
I see a lot of amazing work in China from Chinese designers I've never heard of, rather than in Europe, actually. And you see projects published, never heard of the architect, never heard of the lighting design. You think, wow, that looks pretty good. So I'm very impressed by what I'm seeing, not firsthand, unfortunately enough. I think there's some great work going on, and perhaps they're leaping in front of us. Perhaps our evolution, which has been, it's only 40 years of really serious evolution, I think, from that 1980s where things really started to take off for lighting designers to now. And Technology has changed, as we've talked about, so we can do things in smaller details and there's more tools there. But I think it would be great to see us pushing more boundaries. I think also we have clients and architects that also are a little bit conservative and perhaps don't want to push things as far as some of the talent that is here might allow. So I think there is stuff going on in the world that's impressive, perhaps just not on our doorstep so much.
I'm going to say one thing, which again, it's not a critique, but the Radiance Award for Lighting Design in ILD, the Dark Awards was won by a facade lighting scheme of an old cathedral, and it's an immaculate piece of work by skilled people who are at the height of their profession, and it's a beautiful job in images as it is in reality. But it's quite a conventional job, if you look at it from another point of view. It's a job that could have been done by a good lighting designer with the right tools any time over the last 50 years. And I'm mentioning that not to knock the work that LKL did on that, because it's perfect, brilliant. Cologne Cathedral, sorry, excuse me, Cologne Cathedral. Cologne Cathedral's been lit with architectural lighting about 3 times, and the most recent one by Lippenslicht is incredible, beautiful. But I just found myself kind of at the same time being slightly disappointed that some what more edgy and controversial wasn't happening, because it looks like just more good work.
I think we've got time for one more question, which I think was one of the front.
Hi. I wanted to pick up, Nick, on your point about pressures, and I just sort of wondered, particularly the volatile climate at the moment, tariffs, Iran war, supply chain pressures, how you feel either yourselves or the industry is being affected, the threats, but also any opportunities in there?
It's really difficult because it's completely counterintuitive. We have won more work since the war broke out in the Middle East than we were winning before, and we were winning a lot before. Now it could just be luck, because at the end of the day we're tiny, minuscule little businesses, but we've been winning some pretty substantial, quite important projects in the Middle East. So logic would tell you it should be falling apart at the seams. The truth is, I believe hospitality has to fall apart next year because there's no one staying in the hotels in Dubai. Saudi Arabia has been a tough push. I mean, Saudi Arabia has been brilliant to all of us that work there. Their vision is amazing, and most lighting designers have benefited from that region. But the current war has to take its toll on projects moving forward. We're not seeing it directly, and that may just be an individual thing. So the opportunities haven't changed. It's the other way around, actually. To be honest, but there's a lot of what we've won recently is sovereign wealth infrastructure projects, not a lovely little boutique hotel by private equity that may be more cautious. So railway stations, public rail museums, more that sort of area. So the sovereign wealth wants to keep building that region. So probably good to ask the others as well. They have different experiences.
I'd say I don't do so much public realm, so I'd say that there's lots of inquiries, but there's less people pushing the button right now. So it's almost getting their ducks in a row rather than committing. So things that would have gone quicker are taking longer. And I think we wake up every day not knowing quite what the mood is within what's going to happen. It's sort of, and I think, but what's good is that people are getting the ducks in a row that's quite a good thing, because then hopefully when things settle down, that we all positively think they will, things start. And actually we've had quite a lot of, what was really interesting about a month ago, it seemed to be a bit quiet, and suddenly it's much busier. Maybe it's also the fact that life goes on. And I think that, we've had more inquiries this month than ever before. So, well, not than ever before, but so life goes on.
Similar for you, Keith, or?
Yeah, I think we got a lot of inquiries as the war started from Dubai, which felt like bravado, because we didn't win any of the jobs.
Awkward.
But I think what happens is that it's kind of spooked to market, spooked money. Money doesn't like being spooked, so it slows things down. So it isn't just about that region. I think it has an impact on people's investment plans. We are quite far downstream. You know, if you employ us, you're probably going to build it. I always think you don't. You know, you need architects and engineers and planning and all of those things. By the time you get us involved, you're pretty confident. Otherwise, it just feeds down the drain. Otherwise, so I always think that we get involved when they know that they've got the financing in place. It doesn't always go like that, and I do feel that lots of investment and lots of people, the way money's spread around the world, has been slightly spooked during those first couple of months. But now it feels like there's kind of latent energy in that. We're just going to do something.
I am going to call it there because we've got one more talk at 3:15, which is also from Spurs Major. Ben's Roos is going to be asking, can we still design consciously with light? So please stick around for that in 15 minutes time, just under. I'm sure these guys will be sticking around as well, so if you do want to ask them any questions, feel free. But thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really interesting.